What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and today once again we are going to nerd out on nutrition and health subjects. Today we are going to look into my DNA, into my core, my soul, below my soul. That's my DNA. So as you can see by the title, I did a DNA test to see my traits, to see my ancestry, and most importantly, to see my risk of certain genetic diseases, or the genetic risk of certain diseases, because we've got genetic factors and non-genetic, like lifestyle factors, for every disease. And in here we are going to see if I am in an increased or decreased risk of any of the major diseases. So I think this is just fascinating, and without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so I did my test with Telomere. I bought it on Amazon. They send you a little cup, you have to spit on the cup and then mail it back, and after like 4 weeks the results were in. So as you can see, they test a lot of things. You've got diseases, monogenetic diseases, pharmacology, that is if certain drugs work or not on you, which is actually really incredible. Traits like physical and mental traits, wellness, this is gonna be fun, and ancestry. So we're gonna start by ancestry because a lot of people think this is the most interesting one. So this is where my ancestry comes from. 92.7% European. I'm Portuguese. Everyone in my family is Portuguese. Pretty much everyone in my family lives in this village. So yeah, no news there. And I'm 7% North African and Middle East Asian. And pretty much everyone in the south of Europe has a little bit of Northern Africa, which is understandable. Now let's dive in into the European part. I'm only 56% Iberian. Iberian is from the Iberian Peninsula, that is Portugal and Spain, and I'm only 56 from here, which I thought it would be higher. I'm 17.7% British, so as of now, I don't need to worry about Brexit. And I'm 13.4% Italian, or about 15% Italian. No, nothing new there. So that's basically it for my ancestry. Now let's look at my favorite part, diseases. And as you can see, we've got cancer, cardiovascular diseases, digestive, eyes, mental, and all of that. And to be honest, we're not going to learn a lot here. We've got asthma. I have a higher risk of asthma. This is my biggest genetic risk when it comes to diseases, which turns out to be great because I have asthma. I haven't had any symptoms in over 10 years, but when I was a child I had severe asthma, and it now makes a little bit of sense, and it's interesting to see that this checked out. Pretty much there's nothing really, I don't have any high risk for any serious condition. I have a low risk of obesity, which is funny because I have a really hard time gaining weight. Low risk of schizophrenia, that's good to know. That's pretty much nothing super interesting here, to be honest. I got a little disappointed. And then you got typical risk of all of this stuff. You can pause the video and read, but I don't have any super higher risk or lower risk of anything, so yeah. Now let's look at monogenic diseases, and honestly I'm gonna skip over this because it's just if I have a variant of some gene or not, and the only variants that I have is for Gaucher's disease and hereditary hemochromatosis associated with HFE. I'm also going to skip the pharmacology because, let's be honest, we won't understand anything. And let's jump to the traits. Now this is the most understandable part, and in here you have tons and tons and tons of things. You can look at them once at a time. I want to see biological aging, and there's another one down here that is longevity. These are the two ones that are really important to me because I do hope to live over 100 years old. And when it comes to biological aging, I seem to have a genetic predisposition to have a regular telomere length. The telomeres are like the tip of the shoelaces that keep our DNA together, and over time they tend to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and we can measure aging that way. We used to think that it was impossible to grow telomeres back, but because of the work of Dean Ornish with a whole foods plant-based diet, we learned that eating a healthy diet can actually increase the size of your telomeres, so make you younger biologically. We still need a lot more research here, but I highly recommend you to look it up. So when it comes to telomere, I have a genetic predisposition to have a normal length, but this is not actually the length of my telomeres, it's just my genetic disposition. But the most important part for me is in here when it says longevity. As you can see, I have all the indications of increased odds to live for 95 years or more. So I was super happy with this one because I do hope to live longer. Really interesting, you have IQ measures, and turns out I have a genetic predisposition for an increased IQ, and this is mostly because I was breastfed. People who are breastfed tend to have a slightly increased IQ. I didn't know that. But now let's look at the wellness. This is the most applicable part to sports and nutrition. I have a reduced antioxidant capacity, which is really bad if you are trying to perform on an athletic level, because we need to recover from the oxidative stress caused by exercise, but I can counterbalance this by eating a little bit more antioxidants, a little bit more fruit and veggies and all of that. That's great. I have an increased vitamin A metabolization from beta carotene, so a lot of people have trouble getting vitamin A from carrots and pumpkin and all of that because it's in the form of beta carotene, but turns out I have an increased metabolization, which is awesome. And if I click here on diet response, this is also a good one, diet response. It just basically says that I tend to have a lower BMI. I tend to be on the skinnier side, which is true. Exercise induced muscle damage. We have the initial phase, the second phase, and the regeneration capacity. And turns out I have some protective traits and some increased traits. But my muscle damage does seem to have a lower or slower regeneration rate, which is really bad when you're trying to be an athlete. I tend to have normal HDL cholesterol, normal LDL cholesterol, and this is a very important one for all the vegans here, the omega-3s. But there's three forms of omega-3, ALA, EPA, and DHA. ALA is the one found in plants, EPA, DHA is the one found in fish and in algae, and vegans tend to not eat algae and obviously don't eat fish. So we rely on the conversion of ALA to EPA and then DHA in our bodies, but this conversion is very, very complicated. I have videos here about it, and turns out my own conversion is a little bit reduced, is lower than average, so probably I should really supplement EPA, DHA, which I do from VivoLife. Then we've got another one that I wasn't very happy about. Turns out my genetics say that I should be an endurance athlete and not a resistance athlete, and that's probably why I have such a hard time building muscle. So everything says that I should be running marathons and not lifting weights. Then we've got some really important ones. My risk of tendinopathies in my lower extremities, so legs, and my upper extremities, arms. And I have a protective effect in my legs, which probably is true. I never had any joint problems in my legs, but I do have joint problems in my hands and wrists, and turns out I do have an increased risk for it. So once again, it checks out. Then we've got vitamin B12 levels and vitamin D, another two very important ones for vegans. For the vitamin B12 levels, I have a normal absorption rate, but for the vitamin D, which we get by converting sunlight, when our skin is in contact with sunlight, we convert the sunlight into vitamin D. Turns out my body has a hard time converting that sunlight into vitamin D, so once again, supplementation probably is more important here. Okay everybody, and that was it for my genetic results. I was really pissed off that it didn't say anything about Alzheimer's because my grandpa had Alzheimer's, but it's all good. So if you want to support the channel, make sure to use my code RP5 to get 10% off on the entire Vivo Life store, the best supplements on the market. I'm gonna see you all in the next video. Peace.